everyone, my name is Manal Al-Fayez and you're watching From Scratch. On today's episode of From Scratch, we're making breadcrumbs. With the breadcrumbs, we're going to use it for two different dishes of the day. One, to make our arancini, and the second, to top it off, our carbonara dish with some herbed breadcrumbs. To make breadcrumbs, it's super easy. All you have to do is grab a food processor, put some stale bread or even fresh bread, it doesn't really matter, in your processor. It goes without doing anything, and all you're doing is pulsing it to create a breadcrumb texture. So you don't want to let's say overfill your container. So you want to do it slowly, little by little. So all I have right now is some broken down pieces of bread to make my actual breadcrumb mixture. What I'm gonna go ahead and do next is chop up my herbs. I have some parsley, some rosemary, some dill, and some thyme that I'm gonna chop them down. Divide my breadcrumb mixture into two, just because I'm using them for two different dishes. I only want one part that is gonna be herbed. I'm gonna pop it in the oven, and then our herbed breadcrumb mixture is done. All right, so I'm just gonna grab my cutting board and I'm going to take this as a tip to take back home, which is to put a piece of paper underneath your cutting board. It does have to be wet, so I'm just gonna go 1 second to wet my piece of paper very quickly. All you want is a really just damp piece of paper, and this damp piece of paper is actually going to help prevent your cutting board from moving around. A very unstable cutting board is a big hazard in the kitchen, so you want to make sure that your cutting board is stable. So all we're going to do is start off by chopping up some herbs. All I'm going to do now is bunch them together and grab a really sharp knife. Sharp knife is key at this point because you're dealing with very delicate herbs. And these delicate herbs, once you chop them for quite so long, they turn black in color. So you still want that vibrant green color to stay at the end. So you're just bunching them up and chopping them through. Here I have all of my chopped herbs, mixed chopped herbs together. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a bowl right over here, and then I'm gonna put in my herbs and a good quantity of my broken down pieces of bread that are now, let's say, considered as breadcrumbs. I'm going to crisp them up in the oven at, let's say, a high temperature for a short amount of time. I don't want to put them in for too long, just because you have bread that might burn, as well as some herbs that also might burn. So you really want to keep an eye on your mixture. So I have an oven tray right here that is lined with baking paper. So I'm just going to transfer it into my baking tray. Spread it around. After I have it spread out just like so into my parchment paper, I'm going to go ahead and place it in a preheated oven. I have my preheated oven at around 200 degrees. So I want it at a high temperature, keep that in mind, but you want to put a timer for a maximum of 5 to 6 minutes. You don't want anything to burn. All right, so what I have over here is the residual amount of breadcrumbs that I'm going to also place in the oven, just like the herb breadcrumbs that I have. I'm gonna crisp it up and use it for my arancini. Right after the break, we're gonna start by making our arancini. Welcome back, everyone. So while we were on the break, what I did was I pulled out our herb breadcrumbs, as you can tell over here, and I slightly toasted our plain breadcrumbs that are actually going to be used for our arancini. So let's get started on our arancini. Arancini is basically risotto balls. So all we have to do for the beginning is make our risotto and cool it down. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing right now. For that, what you're going to need is olive oil, some black pepper and salt, some garlic, some lemon juice at the end, arborio rice. Let's just quickly talk about this for a second. Arborio rice is an Italian rice. It is short in grain. It has quite a lot of starch as compared to basmati rice. For this dish, for any type of risotto or any dish that you're going to use arborio rice, you never want to wash the rice because that will jeopardize the texture, that will break down the actual granule itself. So you never want to wash it. We've got some chopped brown onions, some butter that we're going to use at the end, and some Parmesan. We're going to finish off with some cream if needed. To start off, what you need to have is some heated vegetable stock. So you want to make sure that it's heated and not cold, just because while you're cooking your risotto, you don't want to add a very cold liquid, and that's going to jeopardize the cooking doneness. So hot things go with other hot things, basically. Always keep this in mind. And I'm going to start with adding a good amount of olive oil. So you don't want to be stingy with the olive oil. You want to add a good amount, just because you want to make sure that you coat those granules of rice towards the end. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a small amount of brown onions that are pre-chopped and saute those around. Making sure that I don't cook them too much. You don't want your onions to brown at this point. You just want them to turn translucent. So this is a really important tip to keep in mind. I'm gonna add in some of my garlic, and this is already pre-minced. Just want a small amount in there. And you just wanna cook down the garlic until it is fragrant. I'm gonna go ahead and start by salting, not with a generous amount, slowly. I like to salt gradually. I don't really like to salt only towards the end. You want to slowly build up those flavors, but you don't want to risk over salting. So that's very important to start slow. So once my onions and garlic have started releasing those flavors and smells, I'm gonna add in my arborio rice and make sure I coat all those granules of rice with the oil. And slightly start by toasting them, not so much. And you also want to be very delicate at this point, right? So I made sure that all of those granules of rice have been exposed to heat. What I'm going to do next is I'm slowly going to start ladling in my vegetable stock that is warm. You don't want to drown those granules of rice with liquid. You just want enough to slowly start cooking it down, right? So I've reached to that syrupy consistency. I'm gonna lower down the heat, as I said, to, let's say, a low heat. I'm at number 4, depending on your stove at home. You wanna go down to a low heat. I'm gonna add a good amount of butter in there. If you do have, or if you have some extra brown butter made at home, if it's even infused, that's even better. I would highly recommend to add that. So I'm just gonna add in the butter, let the residual heat and the low heat kind of melt that butter and get it nice and creamy. Gonna keep on mixing. very delicately. Kind of want to do a folding motion rather than a rapid mixing. A properly cooked risotto should not keep its shape. It should, once plated, it should fall into kind of like a soupy-ish texture. Not so soupy that the liquid is completely, let's say, separated from the rice granules itself. It should look very creamy and nice, right? So we've reached to that syrupy consistency. I'm gonna go ahead and add in some of that cream, just a small amount. And it's the reason why we have cream over here is not for texture purposes. It is solely for taste purposes. Add in some of our Parmesan cheese. I really like Parmesan cheese, so I might have added a bit extra. So solely depends on your liking. If you want to add some more, if you even want to remove it, it's solely up to you. And then we're going to empty it out into your prepared tray that is ready to go into the fridge. So you want to spread it out. So right at this stage is a perfectly cooked risotto. As I said, it should flow and it should not keep its shape. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the fridge. I'm gonna cheat, as I said, and put it in the freezer. I'll see you right after the break. Welcome back, everyone. So during the break, what I did was I placed our risotto in the fridge to chill. While that happens, what I'm gonna do is actually work on our second dish of the day. So for the second dish of the day, what we have already made is our herbed breadcrumbs that is gonna be used as a garnish only. And what we're gonna do right now is start preparing for our carbonara. Our carbonara is a very simple dish. It solely depends on the quality of the ingredients that you have. To start with that, what we're gonna do is slowly render down some beef bacon in our pan. While that happens, we're gonna pop in our spaghetti in the boiling water. While that cooks, we're gonna actually make the sauce. The sauce is very simple, it's really delicious. It solely depends on egg yolks together with a mixture of both cheeses, Parmesan and pecorino, that makes a really creamy sauce without the use of cream. So to do that, what I'm gonna do is start my pan. And we're starting with dry heat. I'm not gonna add any oil in our pan just because our beef bacon does contain quite a lot of natural oils in it that is slowly going to be released in the pan. And then I'm going to add in my bacon, beef bacon to be exact. Just gonna add a small amount. You don't want that much. You wanna grab a spatula. And mix that around. While that happens, what I am actually gonna do is I'm going to mix up the sauce to make it ready for the time that I'm actually going to add in the cooked pasta into my pan. And what you're gonna need for that is 2 egg yolks. This is gonna add a lot of creaminess into your dish. And then what I'm going to add next is Parmesan cheese. You wanna have a whisk in handy. I'm gonna add some Parmesan cheese, a good amount of that, together with some pecorino cheese. And you wanna whisk that until it kind of forms a nice paste. We're gonna set this aside for later. this thick paste will be diluted with the pasta water, as you can see over here. But I'm only gonna use the pasta water once I have my pasta inside my pan. The reason for that is because once you have your pasta in your pan, a lot of starches will be released into the water, which is gonna help with thickening up your sauce. So while this is rendering down, it's almost done. So meanwhile, I'm going to drop my pasta into the boiling water. And I'm just gonna grab that, put it right in. I don't really mind that my pasta is protruding from the actual pot itself. It will slowly go down on its own. So there is no need to break your pasta in half. Please don't do that at home. All right, so I have my beef bacon that is completely rendered down. What I'm gonna do is switch off the heat, just because you don't want to risk the fact that it might burn. So this is a perfect rendered texture. So once the pasta starts to cook, it will slowly fall down into the boiling water. So there is no need to rush it. So depending on the pasta itself, it might take longer, might take a shorter amount of time. So you just want to make sure that you don't overcook it. I don't really like overcooked pasta. The best pasta is always cooked to an al dente stage. So this is a perfect doneness that you want to reach over here. While this cooks, I'm back over here trying to kind of melt down the sauce. I'm gonna grab a small amount of liquid, a hot liquid, and whisk it in. So you're kind of tempering your eggs. So by tempering, what I mean by that is you're slowly introducing heat into your eggs to prevent it from coagulating at a later stage. Basically, what that means is you don't want to turn it into scrambled eggs. So I'm going to keep on adding some more cheese into this. Just a bit more. It should be quite creamy, and the cheese element is going to add to that creaminess. What I'm going to do is grab my strainer together with some tongs. I'm going to slowly have this inside. Kind of strain it. You still want some of that liquid content in there, but not so much that it's drowning in pasta water. And back into your pan. Okay, so at this stage, I'm going to slightly increase the heat just to bring that pan back up to temperature, the temperature that we want. And start by coating our pasta strands in the oil. Grab a ladle, add in some pasta water, and let it slowly start to cook down in the pan. This is the most ideal way of making pasta. This is exactly how pasta is made in restaurants, in any professional kitchen. So you really want to try to avoid straining that pasta water and then adding in the sauce. So this is exactly how you want to work. You want to have your pasta boiling in a pot together with your pan. That's right next to you. So I can tell that the liquid is almost gone. It is almost completely absorbed by the pasta itself. What I'm going to do next is switch off the heat. I'm going to take it off of the heat completely and then bring it to my station. What I'm gonna do is add in the pasta sauce, as we saw before. I'm gonna grab my spatula, add in the pasta sauce, which consists of egg yolks together with a mixture of 2 cheeses, Parmesan and Pecorino cheese. We're going to mix those together very quickly, just like so. And you're ready to actually plate up your pasta. So with that, I'm going to quickly rearrange my station, and then we're gonna come right after the break. All right, you guys, so what I have ready is our pasta that is ready to be plated up. I cleaned down my station really quickly, and what I'm gonna do is start by plating it up. I'm gonna do it quite fancy. I mean, you don't really have to do this at home. So what I'm gonna use is a ladle and tongs, together with tongs, to create this spiral kind of technique. We're going to let it fall onto the plate itself. Continue moving around and slowly releasing. What I'm gonna add next is our herbed breadcrumbs that we made at the very beginning. Just right over the top, just for garnish. And finish it off together with some Parmesan cheese. All right, so here we have our first completed dish of the day, which consists of our breadcrumbs that were made from scratch. We added some fresh herbs and toasted it in the oven to pair together with a carbonara dish. Right up next, what we're gonna be making is the arancini. All right, everyone, so we already finished up our carbonara dish, and what we have last to do is finish up our arancini. And what I have right in front of me is a 1, 2, 3 station, as I like to call it, which is a dredging station. We've got some flour, eggs, together with our homemade breadcrumbs that we made at the very beginning. What I pulled out from the fridge is our risotto that is now completely cooled down. What I'm gonna do really quick is kind of fluff it up a bit and take a small amount right into my hands and shape it into a ball with a hole right in the middle. I'm going to grab our cheese. So the type of cheese that I use for today is a mozzarella cheese. And what I'm just gonna do is kind of close it by just cupping my hands together and kind of maybe adding just a bit more to seal it off completely. You really don't want to have any cheese or pieces of cheese protruding from the risotto ball, just because it might burn in the fryer. Speaking about a fryer, what I have over here is a fryer that has been set up to temperature, and the temperature you want to fry at is between 165 up to 180. I really wouldn't recommend to fry up to exactly 80 just because it would tend to burn. So what I'm going to do is ball them up just like so. And then we are going to start with dredging. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. I like to work systematically because it cuts down on a lot of prep time, just because you've got your muscle memory to kind of help you guide through. So we're just going to keep on doing this until I reach up to 3 risotto balls, and that's enough for plating and enough for 1 serving. As I already mentioned, we've got some flour, some eggs that are just broken down and whisked through, and then we've got some breadcrumbs that we made at the very beginning. What I'm going to do right now is actually salt every single step, which is very important. Every single step needs to be salted, and I'm gonna add some black pepper as well. So you want to make sure you carry those flavors all the way throughout, and that's why it's very important to season in every step. All right. And then what I'm also going to do is pop on some new fresh gloves and start the dredging process. Before I actually start frying, what I'm gonna do is check the temperature that my fryer is at, and that's simply just by putting in my thermometer. Thermometers are very handy to keep in your kitchen. They're very important just because you wanna make sure that you don't fry at a very high temperature. So my fryer is exactly at 183, so that's a bit too high in temperature. What I'm gonna do is lower down the temperature for it to be perfect when it's ready for me to drop those risotto balls in the fryer. So what I'm gonna do now is just give it a quick balling once again, and then put it into my flour, which is step number 1 of the dredging process. And then kind of dab off any extra excess of flour. You don't want that much, you just want a nice coating. Next, what I'm gonna do is drop it into my eggs, but I'm not going to mix it through just yet. I'm gonna do the same process for the rest of the risotto balls, being very delicate, right? And then giving that one more shaping, right? Last risotto ball into the flour, and then lastly into the eggs. And what I'm going to try to do is move them around ever so slightly with one hand, and then using the other clean hand for the breadcrumbs. Going to drop this in here. Right, as I said, I'm going to use my clean hand to move this around and completely coat it in the breadcrumb mixture. You want to make sure that you get a thorough mix into this container just to get a good amount of breadcrumbs all the way through, just because you want to have a nice and crispy exterior after frying. A nice last shaping before putting them into the fryer. As I said, I'm going to check the temperature one last time. It should read from around 165 up to 180 degrees. All right, so I'm exactly at 180 degrees. What I'm gonna do is slowly start to lower them down. I do wanna go lower in temperature, so as you know, once you introduce a cold ingredient into a hot substance, it will start to lower down in temperature. Going to do the same for the rest, just until I get a nice golden brown in color. All right, so the first risotto ball that I had in there is ready to come out of the fryer, and what I have prepared over here is a tray lined with some tissue paper that I'm just gonna let it rest on top for it to collect any unwanted extra oils. These two are also ready to come out of the fryer. And That's it with frying of our risotto balls to make a dish called arancini. What we are actually going to do next is plate up everything together, and then our episode for the day is completed. I'll see you guys right after the break. All right, everyone, so we are on our very final last step of the day, which is plating together our arancini. Keep in mind, we did make the breadcrumbs from scratch, which we use to coat our risotto balls to make our arancini. To finalize our plate, what I'm gonna do is take some ready-made tomato sauce that I actually made a few days ago. Put it right at the bottom. Use it as kind of like a bed for our arancini balls. And what I'm gonna do is lift up our arancinis, put them together. Top them off with some truffle oil, which is gonna add a lot of flavor and aroma. And the very last final step of the day is just to garnish with some fresh basil at the top. There we have it, our final dish of today. We used our fresh homemade breadcrumbs from scratch to make our final dish, arancini. So there we have it, our two finalized dishes. What we did at the very beginning is breadcrumbs from scratch, where we actually made a herby breadcrumb to top our carbonara dish as a garnish. And our regular breadcrumbs we used to coat our arancini to fry it off. Stay tuned for another episode on From Scratch.